Hello and welcome to another video. Today we're going to be covering one of the most important conversion points in a marketer's tool belt, and that is the form submission. It's something that you really can't get away from, and it is one of the more difficult things to track, considering there's really no blueprint on how to track them, or at least one single standard. Different forms have different ways to actually be able to track. So what we're going to cover today are all those different kinds of ways to make sure that you're able to track really just about any form that you come across. Um, what we have to start here is actually just a cheat sheet. So I've created this kind of flow path for you that you can go and you can check, and you'll see actually which trigger might be best for you. Um, we'll have this posted up on our blog. So if you do want to refer back to this, please go visit the link that will be in the description, and then you can download and save this image to refer back to whenever you like. What we're also going to do here today is create a video with bookmarks on the actual recording, so you'll be able to just jump to whatever trigger suits you best as well. So feel free to save the link to this video and revisit whenever you need to, just to be able to get a refresher on how to actually track different kinds of forms that you need. With that being said, we'll kick things off. In any circumstance, what you want to do first and foremost is really to actually test the form. You're going to want to submit a form and observe what actually happens here. So to do that, we'll want to open up our tag manager, and we'll enter preview mode. So I've already started this here. So I've entered preview mode. I've added the URL that I want to track, which is just this home page. And then I find the form that I want to track. So scrolling down here, we have our form. The first thing that I like to do personally as well is I like to right click on it and inspect. Over time, you'll start to recognize different kinds of forms. Common forms are maybe WordPress, Contact Form 7, Gravity forms, and really a whole host of other ones. Depends on what kind of site you use as well. Those ones are common on WordPress, but might not necessarily be common on Shopify, as an example. So first thing I like to do is just to inspect the form and just see if I can get any idea of what kind of form it is. So you might want to go through it, take a few looks. You can even screenshot it. So if you do notice anything in here that looks to be familiar, then you can go and refer back to it. So generally, this is what I like to do. I'm actually not seeing a ton of information here as to what the actual form is, and that's okay. We don't always need to have that. But typically, that's how I like to start. You can typically see if it's a Gravity form, or if it's a WordPress contact form, or a WordPress breakery form, or whatever it may be. You tend to be able to find that in this source code. So after you do that, I'd almost encourage you to even take a screenshot if there's things that you want to remember from it. Once that's done, it's really just about completing the form and seeing what happens. So just putting in a test submission and observing what happens. So what happens here? Okay, the page doesn't change. We don't see a change in URL. I see a thank you message right here, and we can also check what happens on the preview mode. So we can see a few different events kind of took place. We have this form submit event that was triggered, a form start as well. So those are interesting things to note. We want to take note of what we've found so far and how we want to proceed. So in this scenario, when you see a thank you message, you could jump to the element visibility trigger, and that'll be linked in the video below. When you see a form submission event, you can jump to the gtm.formsubmit auto event. If you change URLs, so if it goes to maybe a thank you page, that's when you can use something like a page view trigger. If you don't see anything, there's no message, there's no page being redirected, you're not seeing anything show up in your GTM preview, then there might need to be a custom solution created. And that's where you'd have to maybe create some kind of data layer push, essentially. And we'll cover that as well in this section. To do that, though, you will need access to the back end of the site, a little technical know-how, but what we're going to do is we're also going to use AI. It's 2025. you should be using it. You should be using it to upgrade your skills. From being a non-technical marketer to somebody who has some minor competencies in, some dev work. So that's something that we'll also jump into that will be a bit new out on this channel. And so that'll cover this intro here. I do encourage you to check out the different bookmarks that we have in the video moving forward here, just to be able to find how you want to track more easily. If none of these apply to you and you can't access the backend, or maybe you're using an embedded form from a third party, say something like HubSpot, that will require a bit of a different video. So embedded forms typically require a bit of a custom solution that's specific to the third-party software that you are using or that's hosting the form itself. And so we'll have different videos and blog posts related to that as time goes on. But if you do have a question, I encourage you just to leave it in the comments. So if you do have an issue with an embedded form from a third party that none of these work with, then just let me know. Otherwise, continue on in the video and just choose whichever one works best for you. All right, so the first form trigger that we're going to work with here is the auto event. The auto event is essentially just an event that automatically happens whenever a form is submitted. It's a Google Tag Manager event or a Google event. It doesn't apply to all forms, but it does seem to be a catch-all for a good amount of them. So this is always a good first place to start. There are some things that you need to watch out for when setting up this trigger, and we'll cover that in a second. But first and foremost, what we'll do is we'll want to turn on a couple variables. So if you go to your variables section, configure, and you scroll to the forms, you can click a couple of them. I tend to just turn them all on when I'm doing some of this testing. So I just click all of these and turn them on. Once that's done, you'll want to go, preview your website and fill out the form. So we already have done that in the video, of course. And so we just went to our site, filled it out, and we have this form submit event. What those variables do that I was talking about there is they'll give you some unique identifiers for the form. So, when we build this trigger out, if we do want to specify a specific form on our website, this will help us. We could look at, the URL that it's on, but sometimes you have multiple forms on one page, maybe an instance of a contact form and a newsletter form or something to that effect. So you might need some more technical identifiers like the class or element, ID, whatever else there might be. So that's why we have those enabled. Once you have that, you want to go to your triggers and you want to create a trigger for this. So trigger configuration, and there's just a form submission trigger. If you want this just to trigger for all forms on your site, then you can just have this as all forms. But if you do care about, tracking the specific trigger, that's where those variables are going to come in. So a lot of times people will just leave this as all forms, and that's okay. We'll do some forms just to show an example here. So I'm going to choose some forms. And what I'll do from here is I'll look at these variables that we had. So, we have a classes and an element variable here. I'll probably go with this form class. The one thing you do need to be careful of is just making sure that your other forms don't have the same class or element or ID. Those are things that you can change in your website backend, but generally you can find one of the unique identifiers. So just make sure that when you do create this trigger, if you're creating it for another form, just make sure that the variable that you're using doesn't overlap. So when you fill out the other form, you don't see the exact same form class variable right here. So I'll do this. I'll go in here. There's a form classes variable. If this isn't here for you already, you'll just want to click this. You'll just want to click this plus button and go into here, and there's form classes right here. You can do equals or contains. It's up to you. If you want to be a little more accurate, probably want to do equals though. The last thing, which is really important, is this check validation. So one of the things that I found with this form submit trigger is that it can fire on improper submissions. So if somebody doesn't add their email to the field, and this is a required field, and they press submit, it'll essentially trigger on the submit button, even though the form didn't go through. So it could misclassify the firing event. And so you want to do this check validation, and this will just essentially only fire if the form is successfully submitted. Google recommends that you enable this only on the pages when you where you need it. It's probably a good thing to do, but if you have a form that's just about on every page, you can always just do page URL, and this is probably the one that you want to do. You want to specify the page that it's on, page URL, and then just contains this backslash. And so that for me will now have it show on every page on the site. It'll probably be the same for you. Almost every website has a backslash that ends their URL. So now that's done. This form submission. I will call it GTM. And then we'll save that. I will be addressing creating a GA4 tag at the end of this video, but I do think it's important to mention this now because I like to add a couple extra layers of security when I'm using this trigger. This trigger is a bit tricky. I do almost prefer some of the other triggers like the page view, thank you page view. That's one of the better ones there. And sometimes this multiple firing does make me a little bit nervous. So I do like to add a little extra layer of security when I'm setting up my GA4 tag. So I just created one a little bit early here. So we have a GA4 event. When you're creating your GA4 event, you want to go to advanced settings. And then instead of having this tag firing options for once per event, I like to have it set to once per page. So it'll only fire one time on that page. So if somebody does misfire, it won't fire. It'll essentially, so it won't fire twice. And then you'll save that. So again, I'll be touching on the GA4 event tag at the end of this video, just kind of putting it all together. But it is important to mention with this auto event because I like to personally have this. You don't have to, but personally I do. I like to have it so I have a more one-to-one ratio of a user to event count in my GA4 account. And then coming up next, we will talk about, I believe, the thank you page submission. All right, so now we're going to talk about the thank you page view form submission trigger. This one tends to be a pretty reliable one. I mean, it depends on your form, obviously, but this is always an easy way to get form tracking set up and have it tracking accurately. There's not usually going to be a lot of duplicates, and it's usually one that is an easy fix for people if they do need to redirect to a thank you page after. There's not a ton of coding involved or anything like that. It's usually just a setting that you can change in your forms on the back end. So that's why it's kind of a little bit more accessible for a lot of people. So with that being said, again, we're back onto our website. We're going to submit a form event. And then we'll get redirected to a thank you page. So as we can see here, there's a thank you page, form has been submitted, and then this is the URL. So first thing we want to do is we'll want to copy this page path. Obviously, you want to try to make it so it's a little bit more unique. You don't want to copy just your domain. You want to copy the page path that's unique to the thank you page. Again, if you're doing this for multiple forms, you might have to have a different thank you page for different forms, or you can pass the form ID through the URL. But we won't get too complex on that today. Right now, we'll just look at the thank you page itself. So we'll copy this page path. We'll go back to our triggers. We'll create a new one, and then we'll create a page view trigger. Obviously, now we'll want to only do some page views. Select a variable here, and then we'll want to go to the page, either path or URL. I mean, that's kind of up to you. And then we'll just have the thank you path in it. And we'll have contains. I like to do contains if it's page URL on the chance something gets appended to your URL, whether it's UTM parameters or any other kind of decoration. I mean, it's unlikely, but it's still worth it. If you want to be safe, though, I mean, you can just use the page path one, and then you can do it as equals. That should work just fine as well. So we'll set it as page path equals thank you for now. we'll save it. And so honestly, that's about it for this one. This one's pretty easy. Like I said, if you do ever want to distinguish, the form, you'll typically want to pass some kind of identifying information in the URL of the page. So for each form, you might want a different page, or something you can do that also could work. Something you could also do that can work is you can add this plus sign. This should be an and statement, not an or statement. So it should be this page path equals thank you. And then what we can do is set up a referrer. So this just means what page it came from or where it came from. And so you could maybe set up a referrer page that was, maybe if you're looking at your contact form, you could just say, that was from your contact us page. You could just put refer contains contact us. And then you'd save that. And so this would pretty much say that the form submission would had to have come from your contact us page where your, likely your contact form was on. And then, it also has to trigger on the page path with that is equal to thank you. And so you'll definitely want to test that. So preview and test this to make sure that it works for you and that the refer is accurate. But that is one way to possibly distinguish if you don't have access to the back end to set up more thank you pages, or you don't want to create a bunch of pages and you have a lot of forms. That's a good way to do it. But like I said, honestly, if you ever can, the best way to probably do it is to pass some kind of form identification in the URL to the thank you page, and that would help a lot because then you can set up the page path or page URL to contains thank you, and then it would be something like ID4, and then you'd make this page URL one. But in our case, we don't have that, so we'll just remove that, and we'll remove this, and we'll just save it as is, and this should fire just fine. All right, so now we're going to be jumping into the element visibility trigger. So as stated before, the element visibility trigger is when you see a thank you message that shows up on the page. So we've already obviously done this. We submitted our form, we get this thank you message on the page, right? One thing to look out for is it has to be an HTML element of some kind, so it has to be embedded in the page. Usually you see that. I only make that note because recently I did come across a client who had a thank you message pop up in the browser up here. It wasn't a part of the website, and we actually couldn't, do the element visibility trigger with it because of that. So just make sure it's a part of your HTML elements. It probably is, but it's just a fair warning. So with that being said, to set up an element visibility trigger, it's pretty simple, and it is a really great trigger to use for other methods as well. But essentially what you want to do is just highlight this message first. You'll right click and inspect it. We just want to make sure that this is the right thing. Yep. And so we have this div class element right here. We'll want to right click on this. It's got the thank you message written in it, and that's usually the best thing to do. This is also a hidden field or a hidden message, so it only shows up after a form is submitted. So we'll just want to right click, copy, and then copy selector. Want to make sure it's on the hidden element. So whenever somebody is filling out the form, we don't want to trigger it obviously before. So we don't want somebody to be able to see an element before the form is actually submitted. It has to be on the after. So that shouldn't be a big deal. Again, if it's popping up at the end of the form submission, then it's likely already the case, but it's just something to look out for. So now that we've copied the selector part of it, we want to go back to our triggers. We'll create a new trigger configuration, element visibility, and then for the selection method, we'll use CSS selector. We will paste the selector that we had just copied from our inspect page. I like to reduce this to about 15-20%. That could just be me though. And then you want to set this to observe DOM changes. This is important. If you don't set this, then you really do run the risk of it not firing. Again, you can make some slight modifications if you Possibly you have a form using the same thank you message, but you have forms on two different pages. Um, you could set this up and have some visibility events, and add the page URL to it, and then you can specify what page. Usually that's not as big of a deal with the element visibility trigger. Usually the selector is unique to the thank you message for the form. But if there is any circumstance where you do find that, just change the some visibility events, and then you can usually distinguish by page URL. That's one of the easier ways to set that up. Once that's done, you just set it as EV. And you'll save that. And that should be it. When you preview and test this, you should see this pop up, and it should work well. Yeah, this is one of the more reliable forms of form tracking, I would say. And it's nice and easy because you're not necessarily having to redirect someone after. I would still say the thank you page is one of the most reliable ways to track an event, a form submission event, and it's also kind of nice because you can pass certain variables into the URL. But this is, I'd say, a close second for me whenever I'm working on forms, and it's a nice tricky way to get it set up if you don't have these other methods at your disposal. All right, so in this section, we'll want to talk about using AI to develop a data layer push event. This is a pretty handy tool to have in your back pocket because you're able to really do this with a number of different kind of development requests of AI, and it's something I find a lot of marketers don't utilize as much as they really should to upgrade themselves and become a little bit more technical. So today we're going to address that. If a lot of these other options haven't worked for you, this can be an option. I mean, it is a little bit more complicated, and you might need to do a little bit more back and forth with your respective LLM. But at the end of the day, it's really great if you're running out of options. You need to be able to solve for this, and you're having some problems. You're not able to maybe redirect it, or you're not reliably able to redirect it. Also, too, when it comes to data layer push events, you can also pass through information about the form. So if you are doing any kind of enhanced conversion tracking, you can pass through the email using a data layer push event. Same thing with the phone number and all those kind of things. So yeah, it's very useful, and has proven to be pretty effective for me whenever I've needed to do it. So with that being said, we'll jump into it. So first thing that you'll want to do is you'll access your AI partner, your LLM. For me, I'm just using ChatGPT right now. But what you'll want to do is, go here. I've already, started, but essentially you want to provide a prompt. With this, you'll want to be as descriptive as possible. And some of the main things that you're going to want to highlight are, the kind of script that you want. So in this case, we're requesting a data layer push script. Good to mention what it's for too. So mention that's for Google Tag Manager. You want to say what the event is. So for me, I want a form submission event. So I'm telling it this is what I want to show up in the data layer. And then, I want it to now also tell it when to trigger it. And so to be passed when my form is submitted. Those are the really big main pieces. If you can, and you probably should, try to mention what your form is built with. So if it's like a custom HTML, say that. If it's WordPress contact form 7, if it's Gravity Forms, whatever it may be, make sure you're mentioning that in your prompt as well, because they might have different DOM events. And then finally, too, this is optional if you need it, but just letting them know that your site is built on what your site is built on. So for me, WordPress. And then you also want a detailed outline of how to actually add the script to the site. So again, if you're not super familiar, not super technical, it'll also give you an outline of actually how to implement the script, not just write it. And that's also a really important piece, because if you get the script and you don't know where to put it or how to add it to your site, then it's not going to work out. So with that being said, I sent in this simple prompt, and I got back exactly what I wanted. I got my script here. It tells me what it does. the WPCF7 submit event, and then sends this form submission, and then it actually tells me how to add it. So I go to my site, go to appearance, theme file editor, go to the footer PHP, and then add it just below the body tag. If you, for some reason, don't have access to your theme file editor, you can ask another way. So if you are not able to add it like this, just ask if there's other ways to add it to the site. There's plugins, there's lots of different things that you could do. So what I'd do is I'd copy and I go to my appearance, theme file editor, and I'd add it to the body of my website. With that being said, once that is submitted and published, you'll now want to actually test that and then create a trigger around it. So we'll go and preview the site. Name and information. We'll test it. And we'll go back and we see that it works. So that event that I defined here, as you can see, so this form submission, capital S, is now showing up in our preview. We have no tags obviously associated with it yet. We can see this data layer push event right here. But now we can build a trigger based on this. So we'll want to just copy this. And you can see too in these variables, this is where it would show up, event, form submission there, custom event, form submission. So as you can see, this custom event is what we're going to create a trigger around. So we'll go back here, we'll create a trigger, go to custom event, paste this. If you have forms on different pages, you can, again, go to some custom events and do the page URL. So this would apply to all WordPress contact forms on my entire site. So if I want to specify and narrow it down, I can change and do the page URL contains, and if it's on my contact page, I'll just do contact. For now, I don't really mind. You could also specify that in your actual script. So if you only want the script to fire on your home page, then you can tell your LLM to do that, and it'll do it. So set this up. We'll save. And that's about it. I mean, you can go ahead and make sure you're testing it, but at the end of the day, this should be correct. We've matched it up, and then at the end of this video, we can test it once we set up all of our tags. All right, so here's for the final and probably my least favorite tracking method out there. So what we're going to cover right now is the button click. So if literally all else fails, you cannot, use any of the previous methods, although I really doubt that there's ever a circumstance where you won't. You can default to a button click. The button click would obviously be triggered when somebody clicks on the submit button, the form submit button. And at the end of the day, it's a poor tracking mechanism, because if somebody clicks on it multiple times, that might get counted a couple times. On top of that, too, you can click the button without actually having a form submitted, so it could misfire. So at the end of the day, it is pretty unreliable. But if you found yourself in this situation, then this would be how you do it. So to create new, you go to trigger configuration, go to all elements to start. And we'll just create an all clicks trigger. In addition to that, you want to make sure that your variables are set up. So I already have these on, but go to your configuration settings here and go to your click and just do the click element, click classes, click ID, click URL. Those are just helpful variables to have in generally, but either way, have those on. Submit that. And we'll go in and we'll test. Scroll down to our form, and we can just click the submit button here. Obviously, like I said, you can click this button and obviously form didn't submit, so that's why it's not really reliable. But we have this click submission event that goes on here. And from there, what we'll do is we will look at anything that we can define as unique. So we have our click class, our click element, our click ID. Those are the main ones. I think what we'll do here is use our click class and just copy that. And then now we can go to our triggers, create new, go to all elements, and now just do some clicks. And we used click classes, so we'll choose that variable, do equals, and then we'll paste that there. And then we'll do and then we'll save that. And then that is about it. That should track whenever you preview. It's pretty simple, and like I said, just not the most trustworthy method, but it is a method for sure. With that said, I think the final thing that we'll do is just put this all together in a GA4 event tag. So we'll go to our tags, we'll create new GA4 event. I already have mine set up as a constant variable. You'd add your measurement ID here. I'd recommend adding it as a constant variable if you're going to create a few different events. It just makes life a little bit easier for you. Name it something simple with an underscore. Make sure your naming conventions match the event name so somebody can go in and immediately know which tag it is. And then now we obviously have a few different triggers to go with. So I'm going to go with the element visibility form submission because I removed that redirect after, and I find this to be pretty reliable. I would go into this tag if you're doing form submissions. Sometimes it might be helpful to change this from once per event to once per page. This just essentially removes any possibility of somebody double firing. So if somebody submits a form twice on that page, it'll only count it as one. Most situations, I only really care about the single form submission. Sometimes you might want to track all of them, but this is totally up to you. You can leave it one way or another. If you're using something like the button click trigger, then this would probably be a good idea to switch it over because somebody might click on that button multiple times, and so this would mitigate that. Same thing with that auto event that we also used at the start. So a lot less important when it comes to this element visibility trigger because it should be pretty reliable and should only show up and should really only show up whenever somebody submits a form. So just publish this, go into our workspace, we'll preview it, connect, and we'll just run a quick test. And there's the element. That didn't work, so we'll want to go through and just make sure that this is correct. And for some reason that was incorrect there, so we'll just save it. And that's how you troubleshoot this stuff live. Publish, exit out of our preview mode, and we'll just try that one more time. Been making a lot of changes to this form through the course of this video, so that's probably why that ended up happening. So that's why it's really important to test, and it's good for me to be showing everyone here just that it doesn't always work, and this is why you do need to test and go back. So now we have this element visibility event and our tag fired. And with that being said, everything should go back to our GA4. Obviously, check GA4 in a day or two and make sure that the events are coming through as well. But otherwise, this should cover the video. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them below. If you have any specific forms that you're having an issue to track, just let us know. Like I said, some of those third-party embedded forms can be a little bit tricky. Of note, something like a HubSpot form, something to that effect. They do sometimes require a bit of a custom solution. So if you are having issues, just leave a comment below and I'd be happy to get back to you.